ever kind of stop and think about who can actually, run for office here in the Philippines? And maybe just as important, who can't?
Right. It's more than just filling out some forms.
Exactly. It's this whole, pretty intricate system. And it's designed, really, to try and keep elections fair and make sure the people leading us are, qualified. So maybe you're brushing up for a meeting, you're trying to get a handle on the local political scene, or maybe you're just curious about how our government actually works day to day. This is for you.
Yeah, think of this as a bit of a shortcut, a way to understand a really vital piece of Philippine civic life without wading through all the legalese yourself.
Okay, so what's our goal today?
Well, our focus is pretty essential.
Yeah.
We want to really unpack the qualifications, what you need, and the disqualifications, what can stop you from running for public office here.
And where are we getting this info from?
We're drawing from the big ones. The Constitution, obviously, the Omnibus Election Code, the Local Government Code, and also, crucially, how the courts have interpreted these rules over the years.
So it's not just one document. It's layered.
Very much so. Which, reflects how important this whole process is.
Right. So to keep things clear, we'll tackle this in two main chunks. First, we look at the must-haves, the absolute requirements to even be considered a candidate.
The basics.
Then we'll dive into the flip side, the reasons why someone might be barred from running, even if they seem to tick those first boxes.
Sounds like a plan.
Okay, let's get into it. Starting with, who can actually put their name forward?
So the fundamentals usually start with citizenship. For almost any elected post, you've got to be a Filipino citizen.
Okay, standard enough.
But, and this is interesting, for the very top jobs, president, VP, Congress members, the Constitution is specific. It says natural-born citizen.
A natural-born. Why the distinction, do you think?
Well, it likely reflects a historical concern about potential foreign influence at the highest levels of leadership, ensuring primary allegiance.
Right, that makes sense. Inherent loyalty. Okay, what's next after citizenship?
Age, yeah. And it's definitely not one size fits all here.
Oh, how so?
Well, for president or VP, you need to be at least 40 years old on election day.
40. Okay.
For the Senate, it drops to 35. House of Representatives, you need to be 25.
25. Wow, quite a jump down.
And then for local roles like governor, it's 23. And for mayor, it's 21.
21 for mayor. That's quite a spread from 40 down to 21.
It really is. You could argue it reflects maybe the perceived level of experience or maturity needed for different scopes of responsibility.
That's a good point. Scope and responsibility. What about where you live? Residency.
Residency. Crucial. For president and VP, it's 10 years living in the Philippines. And the key phrase is immediately before the election.
Immediately preceding. Okay, so no popping back just before filing.
Exactly. For senators, it's 2 years in the Philippines. For House Rep, it's 1 year, but specifically in the district they want to represent.
In the district. Makes sense.
And for local officials, it's 1 year in that specific city or province, again, immediately preceding the election. It's all about ensuring that connection to the community.
Yeah, you need to actually know the place you want to represent. Although you do wonder if someone could, technically meet the requirement without really being part of the community fabric.
That's a valid point, yeah. A potential loophole, perhaps.
And then there's literacy.
Yes. You have to be able to read and write. The requirement is in Filipino or any local language or dialect.
So quite inclusive, actually.
Yeah.
Not just English or Filipino.
Exactly. It emphasizes being able to communicate with the people you hope to serve in a language they understand.
Okay, so those are the general qualifications. Are there extra ones for specific big jobs?
There are. For president and VP, besides being natural-born and a registered voter, there's that huge one, the one-term limit for the president.
Right, 6 years and you're done. At least for running for president again immediately.
Correct. A check on power.
And for Congress.
Yeah.
Senators and representatives.
Both need to be natural-born citizens and registered voters. But for House reps, specifically those representing a district, they also have to be a registered voter in that district.
Which, again, makes total sense. You represent that place.
Precisely. And then for local officials, governors, mayors, councilors, etc., the local government code basically echoes those general rules we talked about. Minimum age, residency in the locality, literacy, and being a registered voter there.
So a foundation of rules with specific tweaks depending on the office.
You got it.
Okay, so that covers who can run, assuming they meet all these points.
Yeah.
But now let's flip it. What stops someone? What are the disqualifications? This is where it gets potentially more complex.
Yes, because meeting the qualifications isn't the whole story. Certain conditions can still disqualify you. We can look at these based on where the rules come from.
Like from the Constitution itself.
Exactly. Starting there, we already mentioned the president's single 6-year term limit. That's a constitutional disqualification for immediate re-election.
Okay. What else from the Constitution?
For members of Congress, senators, and House reps, there's a strict prohibition. They can't hold any other government office or job, including in GOCCs, government-owned or controlled corporations, while they're serving.
So no double dipping in government posts.
Right. The idea is focus. Focus on legislative duties and, importantly, avoiding conflicts of interest. You can't serve two masters, essentially.
Makes sense. Okay, so constitutional ones are pretty high level.
Yeah.
What about specific laws, like the Omnibus Election Code? I imagine that gets more detail.
Oh, definitely. The Omnibus Election Code lists several grounds. One is mental incapacity or insanity. If a court has issued a final judgment declaring someone insane or incompetent, they're out.
A final judgment. Okay, seems straightforward. What else?
Conviction of a crime is a big one, but not just any crime.
How so?
It generally focuses on crimes involving what's called moral turpitude.
Moral turpitude. That sounds a bit vague.
It can be. The law doesn't list every single crime, but court decisions, jurisprudence have given us examples. Things like estafa, which is fraud, forgery, bribery, perjury.
So crimes that suggest dishonesty or, well, a lack of morals relevant to public trust.
Exactly. Things the courts see as showing a fundamental character flaw, making someone unfit for public office. And again, critically, it has to be a final judgment, not just an accusation or an ongoing case.
Final judgment. Got it. Are there other crime-related disqualifications?
Yes. The CUM also disqualifies people convicted, again by final judgment, of any offense punishable by imprisonment of 1 year or more.
1 year or more. Okay.
And also crimes involving disloyalty to the government, like rebellion or sedition.
Disloyalty. Is that permanent?
Actually, no. For those specific crimes, the disqualification is lifted 5 years after the person completes their sentence.
Interesting. A path back after a time.
Seems to be the idea, yes. Perhaps allowing for rehabilitation.
Okay. What else is the Omnibus Election Code list?
Another significant one concerns Filipinos who are also permanent residents or immigrants in another country.
The green card holders or...
Precisely. They're disqualified unless, and this is key, they explicitly renounce that foreign residency or immigrant status before running. They have to pledge allegiance solely to the Philippines.
So you have to make a clear choice about your primary loyalty.
Absolutely. It underscores that commitment expected of leaders.
And I guess breaking election rules themselves must be a disqualifier.
You bet. The Omnibus Election Code is very clear on that. Violating election laws is a ground for disqualification.
Like what specifically?
Things like vote buying, vote selling, using threats or terrorism related to the election, using fake documents, a whole list of offenses that directly attack the integrity of the process.
Right. Actions that fundamentally undermine democracy.
Correct.
Okay, that's the Omnibus Election Code. You also mentioned the Local Government Code having specific disqualifications.
Yes, focusing on local officials. The most well-known is probably the term limit.
The 3-term limit.
Exactly. For officials like governors, mayors, vice mayors, you can serve 3 consecutive terms in the same position. After that, you're disqualified from running for that exact same position in the immediately following election.
Immediately following. So they have to sit at least 1 term for that specific job.
Correct. They can often run again after a break or run for a different position. It's meant to prevent or at least limit people holding the same local office indefinitely, though, whether it truly prevents political dynasties is a whole other debate.
Yeah, that's a big ongoing discussion. Does a 1-term break really change things?
It's questionable for some. The Local Government Code also says if an official is removed from office because of an administrative case...
Remove midterm?
Yes. They're then disqualified from running for that same office for the rest of the term they were removed from. It's an accountability measure.
Okay, so accountability for misconduct. We've covered the Constitution, the specific laws. What about these jurisprudential disqualifications you mentioned earlier? What does that mean?
Right. Jurisprudence just means the body of decisions made by the courts, especially the Supreme Court. Think of the laws as the rule book, and jurisprudence as how the courts have interpreted those rules in actual cases over time.
Ah, so the court rulings become part of how the rule is understood.
Exactly. They clarify things, sometimes fill in gaps. We already touched on one example, defining moral turpitude. The Supreme Court decisions give us concrete examples of what falls under that category, making the law easier to apply.
Okay, so the courts provide the practical application. What's another big example from jurisprudence?
Dual citizenship is a huge one, where the Supreme Court has weighed in significantly.
Holding citizenship in another country besides the Philippines.
Yes. The courts, notably in a famous case called Mercado v. Manzano, have consistently ruled that candidates with dual citizenship are disqualified unless they formally renounce their foreign citizenship according to Philippine law.
Formally renounced. So just saying you're Filipino isn't enough if you
Right.
hold another passport.
Correct. You need to take specific legal steps to give up the other citizenship before you can run. It reinforces that idea of undivided loyalty we talked about earlier.
Undivided loyalty. Okay, that's pretty clear. So someone decides they want to run, they think they meet the qualifications, no disqualifications apply. What's the actual process? How do they get on the ballot, and how do these rules get checked?
Well, the absolute first step, the non-negotiable, is filing a certificate of candidacy, a COC.
COC.
You have to file that with COMELEC, the Commission on Elections, within the specific period they set before every election. Miss that window, and you're simply not a candidate. End of story.
Got to get your head officially in the ring. What happens after the COCs are filed?
Then the scrutiny starts. Other people, maybe rival candidates or parties, can file what are called petitions for disqualification with COMELEC.
Challenging someone's eligibility.
Exactly. They argue that candidate X doesn't meet qualification Y or is subject to disqualification Z based on all the rules we've been discussing.
And COMELEC handles these petitions.
Initially, yes. They review the petitions, the evidence, and make a ruling. These usually happen, or are supposed to happen, before Election Day. Of course, decisions can sometimes be appealed to the courts.
So COMELEC is the first hurdle for these challenges. What if COMELEC agrees, or a court later agrees, that a candidate is disqualified? What then?
Generally, yeah, their name comes off the ballot, or votes for them might not be counted depending on the timing, but there's also a provision for substitution.
Substitution.
Yes. Section 77 of the Omnibus Election Code allows it under specific conditions. If a candidate from a political party withdraws, dies, or gets disqualified, the party might be allowed to nominate a substitute candidate, provided they do it within COMELEC's deadlines.
Ah, so a party might not lose its spot in the race entirely just because their initial candidate is out?
Potentially, yes. It adds another layer to the process. It's all part of this quite complex machinery designed to ensure the integrity of who gets to run.
Complex indeed, but clearly vital.
Absolutely. The whole system, with all its parts, aims to make sure, as much as law can, that the people seeking to lead are legally and ideally ethically suitable for the job.
Well, this has been incredibly helpful, really breaking it down. So the big takeaway seems to be that the Philippines has this really comprehensive, multi-layered system for deciding who can and can't run for office.
That's right.
It's definitely not just about wanting the job. There are clear qualifications, quite a few potential disqualifications, and these rules come from all over the Constitution, specific laws like the Omnibus Election Code and Local Government Code.
And crucially, how the Supreme Court has interpreted those laws over time through its decisions.
Right. It's important to see where all these rules originate. They aren't just pulled out of thin air. They reflect core principles in our Constitution and have been shaped by legislation and court rulings.
Mm-hmm. It's an evolving system in some ways.
So, for you listening, as you absorb all this, it really does make you think, doesn't it, about the balance. On one hand, you need minimum standards for people holding powerful positions.
Sure. Competence, integrity.
But on the other hand, you have the fundamental democratic right to participate both as a voter and potentially as a candidate yourself.
It's a definite tension there.
So maybe the thing to ponder is, what are the ongoing debates around these rules here in the Philippines? Are there parts that people argue should be stricter or maybe looser?
Yeah.
How do these regulations actually shape our political landscape day to day? And what does it all mean for, your own understanding of being an engaged citizen?
Yeah, how does this framework impact who we even see on the ballot? And does it achieve the goals it sets out to? Lots to think about there.